Welcome everybody to episode 3 of the Building Black podcast. My name is Kaidi Rodriguez.
I am Marvelyn Brentham Shivers.
All right, so we're going to get started in just a minute for our podcast listening audience. We're waiting for our Facebook family to join us. So you all give us just a minute. Okay, there we are.
You want to share it to the group?
It's in the group.
I thought you was going to share it on your page.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. I don't think we need to.
Oh, maybe I can.
And if you're answering questions.
Hi, Amber. I see you're out there. Hello. And you all, if you can, I'm not sure if you can, but if there's a friend that you feel like could benefit from this, tag them to this video, invite them to the Building Black community, where our mission is to build Black health, Black wealth, and Black love. Hey, Meryl, I see you out there.
Hey,
So tag your people, and we're going to go ahead and jump in. So today, the focus of our conversation is building Black mental health. Our mental health matters. So our podcast listeners out there, welcome. Thank you all for joining us. As I said, I'm Kaidi Rodriguez, and we have my co-host,
Marvelyn Brentham Shivers.
And let's jump into mental health, Black mental health. So this is such a relevant and important topic, especially right now, given everything that's happening in the state of the world. Like we were going through our notes and just saying, well, what are the reasons why we're picking this right now? And essentially, it's just the year 2020.
Right, that's it.
That's
it, that's all.
2020 is synonymous with stress.
Absolutely. From
So,
start to finish.
Right. I don't even want to know what the next couple of months are going to look like at this point. From anxiety to depression to grief. Like we're dealing with it all. We've lost so many people. Rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman, who we just lost 2 weeks ago or so. There's so much that has happened this year. We have to learn how to deal with it all and how to cope and why we need to cope. Because I think many times in our community, mental health is kind of put on the side.
Right.
Even me as a therapist, I feel like it's not a sexy topic to talk about. People don't want to talk about it the same way they want to talk about money or the same way they want to talk about relationship issues, mental health. But we need to talk about our mental health.
Right. And with the mental health, we can't really, that we need it, but we can't put our finger on it. Like if you're feeling drained, you're feeling tired, you're not concentrating, or something's off. But
Right.
There's not like a single thing you can point your finger at. And I
Right.
think that's why mental health is so not only important but difficult to sometimes shift through.
Right. It's easier to fly under the radar. You have when you have a physical health problem, it's my stomach is hurting or my blood pressure is high,
Right.
but I'm depressed. You might not quite know it or realize it.
Yep. Exactly.
So, from COVID to, like I said, just 2020 antics to the revolution, we need to be addressing our mental health. We've always needed to, but no better time than now. So that's part of the reason why we decided to talk about this. So jumping into, Marv, you mentioned we don't even know, we don't always realize what's happening and how our mental health is being affected.
Right.
I wanted to kind of share a personal story of how my own mental health just snuck in and I found myself with mental health issues.
Okay.
So I was about 27 years old, and what was going on at that time? I was about 27. I had just gone through a breakup of a 7-year relationship.
Okay.
I was starting a new job. So this was a job that worked with youth with behavioral and mental health issues in a school. So these were kids that regularly cut themselves on purpose, would refuse to go to school, defiant disorder, like the most serious of the serious problems. Those were the kids that I was working with. So I had just started that job. And the idea of a kid self-harming themselves, that was something for me as a new therapist, as a new social worker, that was something that was really hard for me to deal with. It made me nervous, it made me anxious. I didn't want to deal with it.
Especially at a new job.
Right.
It's your
Right.
first time and then you have all of that to face.
Right,
That's a
right.
lot.
So
Yeah.
there was the starting that new job, there was the breakup of the relationship. I also was working in a different job. I was working two jobs, no, three jobs at the time.
Oh wow.
So I had the school job, I had a private practice that I was working for with kids who were also very sick, and then I was doing role model. That was
Okay.
my mentoring program.
Okay.
So I was spreading myself really thin. I was doing I was going through the breakup and I had the stressors of this job. And there was a few other things that was going on. I can't remember. But it was a really stressful time for me.
Okay.
And so I noticed that, I started to feel really off. I remember talking to you, me and Marv go way back. I was talking to her and I was like, my mind was rambling and thoughts were racing and I couldn't figure anything out. And I was anxious all the time. And I remember saying, maybe I need to talk to someone. And you said, yeah, that might not be a bad idea. So I started therapy and I was telling my therapist what was happening. And basically she said I had anxiety, but I had also had a couple of panic attacks.
Wow.
So there were some times where during that period where I would go into, let's say, a workshop or a conference or something like that. And immediately I felt like I needed to get out of the room, or I felt like if I don't get out of here, I'm going to go crazy, or I felt trapped in the room. And come to find out it was a panic attack. And so all of my stressors, although I didn't realize in and of themselves, they were big, and they all led up to these moments where I would have these panic attacks, and one of them actually led me to the emergency room. So
So before that, you didn't know you were having a panic attack.
right,
You just knew something was wrong. You were having these feelings.
I just felt really emotional and anxious.
Okay, and then you had the situation when you went to the hospital, and they were the ones that told you.
That it was anxiety and panic attacks.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So that was when actually that was when I said I needed to go to the therapist, and the therapist told me I had like anxiety basically.
Okay.
And but I didn't realize that all those little things led to something that was as serious. So what the panic attack felt like, for those of you who don't know, for me, I almost passed out. I felt like I was having, my stomach was retching in circles. I felt like I had to go to the bathroom, but I didn't have to go to the bathroom. Heart was racing. Sometimes you feel like you're going to go crazy, or like you can't breathe, or like you're going to die. Just feeling really tense, on edge, and feeling like you gotta get out of there. And it's all taking place in your head. There's nothing actually physically wrong, but that's what a panic will feel like. Most of the time when I work with clients, they say they feel like they're having a heart attack, or feel like they're gonna pass out, or that
Okay.
they're gonna feel like they're gonna die.
Okay.
So that was what it felt like for me.
So are there some things that you do now where you're paying attention to how you're feeling, or do you know when it's coming, or you're kind of cognizant of
Yeah.
your emotions and
Yeah.
your anxiety?
Yeah, so I've learned, I know what it feels like if it's going to come up now.
Right.
So I haven't had a panic attack in years because I know how to stave it off. And honestly, when COVID first hit, I was really, really happy that I was a therapist and that I had the tools to know how to deal with it myself.
Absolutely.
Because I was nervous, y'all. Like
Yeah.
I
Thought you had COVID?
yes, I thought I had COVID many days. I'll be telling her, taking my temperature. I took my temperature 5 times today.
Oh, one time, y'all. One time. And she has allergies on top of that. So,
Yeah.
But
Yes, I'm a little bit prone. Some people are more prone to anxiety. I'm more prone to anxiety. Some are our brains, and we can talk about that.
Right.
Some brains are more wired for anxiety, but I know how to deal with mine.
Right.
So when COVID hit, and when they said we're going to lock down the state, and I was like, what does that mean? Like, I'm
You lost your
claustrophobic.
mind?
Like,
Oh, my
what do you mean we can't go out? Like, the idea just made me start to feel like things were closing in on me.
Right.
And so I knew when I started to feel that like unsettled feeling, when I started to have the racing thoughts, when I felt like I needed to get outside, that means panic is coming on. For me, it's like, I got to get out of here.
Okay.
So I actually did go outside. It was cold at the time, and I went on a walk.
Okay.
And we'll talk about the power of what cold water, cold showers, cold weather, what that can do for helping panic and anxiety. That was how I knew that I had to get out of this room. For some people, it might be your thoughts are just racing, or you feel like you can't breathe. Those are some of the signs and symptoms.
So for people out there that may be feeling like, oh, maybe I have had some of those symptoms, what are something that you can tell them? What can they do? Should they go see their therapist right away? Should they go? What can they do right now if they're starting to feel some of these symptoms?
Well, we'll get into that a little bit later on when we talk about PTSD and stress. We'll talk about the deep breathing. We'll talk about the progressive muscle relaxation. We'll talk about grounding techniques like cold showers. But these are all things you can do to bring down your panic. And I'll delve into a little bit more of what that looks like.
Okay.
So we have a comment.
Okay.
So Meryl said, yep, I've had panic attacks after my father died. Sharp chest pain, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Exactly. Hey, Slaughterhouse, I see you out there. That's a common symptom, that chest pain, feeling like you can't breathe. And just for our podcast listeners, we have we're recording this podcast via Facebook Live. So when you hear us shout people out, we are interacting live, and we're engaging live with our people in our Building Black community. So you all can join the Building Black community Facebook group. You can send us a request and we will add you. All right, so Tavia says, as a therapist, do you feel the need to speak with a therapist on your own? I'm not ashamed to say I definitely will speak with a therapist on my own. Right now, I started seeing another therapist recently for different issues. So sometimes it may be, at that point for me, it was anxiety. I've had a therapist for relationship stuff. I've had therapists for like kind of navigating spirituality and God stuff. So definitely what most good therapists will tell you is that they have their own therapist, because it's an emotional strain in and of itself just to be taking in everyone's stress and emotional stuff.
And you have to deal with your own stuff as well.
Right, so, exactly. Yeah. So the funny thing is, during COVID, when COVID was at its height here in New Jersey, I actually wasn't seeing a therapist because, again, I felt like I had that part maintained. But I think everybody needs to have someone they can go to deal with their mental stuff at different points in their life. No, that's a good question, Tavia.
Okay, so we're going to jump into PTSD and stress. And just to describe what PTSD is and what trauma is a lasting negative effect on the brain. And so, for example, when we see images of George Floyd and the cop that had his knee in his neck, that is a negative image. But it can cause trauma to us from seeing those images over and over again. It's not just George Floyd. We've seen so many different videos of Black people being murdered in the streets. And the more that we receive that information, not only the images, but just hearing about it when you're on Facebook or in the news or in the newspaper, that can cause PTSD. And so seeing those images over and over again, the intrusive thoughts, is a symptom of PTSD.
Right. So, when you see it and then you can't stop thinking about
it afterwards.
Right. So that was one question I wanted to ask you all: is how is seeing those images on a regular basis, how is that affecting you all? Please drop a note in the comments and tell us, how does it affect you? So for some people, it's a trauma. And as Marv just explained, the trauma is anytime you go through something negative and it has a lasting effect on you. So if you watch that negative video, that video of this man being murdered, and then you can't help but think about it over and over and over again, or you have dreams about it or flashbacks about it, that means that now you have a trauma. And we all have trauma. We can't avoid that. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be, you saw someone killed or you grew up with domestic violence.
Negative that has a lasting effect on the brain.
Right. And it can be emotional too. Yeah. So, your daddy issues, and emotionally you don't open up to anyone. So when your dad left you, that was an emotional trauma for you because it shaped how you believe and how you move and how you act going forward. That's a trauma that needs to be, in a sense, undone or addressed, or just, you have to work through it so you don't see the world through that lens anymore.
Right.
So we want to know from you all, how is seeing those things affecting you all? How is experiencing that kind of trauma affecting you all? So Meryl says, I can't watch any videos of Black people being murdered. I didn't watch it until a month after it happened. It's too triggering. Meryl, I agree with you. I don't watch the videos. I haven't really watched George Floyd. I know Philando Castile. I think was he was. Did you see that one?
That's the last one.
That's the last one you watched.
Yeah,
I didn't watch that one. I think he was shot on camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't watch that. I don't need to see it in order to know that it's real.
Right.
And I don't want that image. I don't want that trauma. I already know about it. I don't want the image in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Some people feel that they need to do that to honor the person.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to do whatever is best for you.
Right.
And knowing, like you said, you can't do it, I can't do it. Knowing that about yourself is important.
Right.
And that's. I'm not gonna go there.
Yeah, I don't go there.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Tavia says those images are extremely traumatizing and often causes anxiety at the sight of an officer and fear of being pulled over.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it kind of trauma can shape your beliefs. So when you see a video like that, you start to think all officers or all traffic stops are potentially life-threatening.
Yeah.
That shapes that belief. And it can be an extreme belief because logically we know that not all traffic stops are dangerous, but some of them could be.
Absolutely.
Because of what we've seen.
Yeah.
So that's a good comment. Meryl says Philando was the last one. I watched it. He was murdered on Facebook Live. Yeah. So these are the kinds of traumas that we experience as Black people on a regular basis.
Right.
And that's why we want to address it, because I don't like to compare, but I feel like we experience trauma more than anybody else.
We do.
I mean,
let's just put it out there. It's okay.
Right. And so it's necessary for us to address it. Now we know that that trauma affects the brain, and Marv is our resident neuropsychologist.
I love how you threw that resident in there.
Marv has a master's degree, y'all, from Columbia University in neuropsychology?
It's neuroscience.
Excuse me, neuroscience.
Get it right.
She has a master's degree in neuroscience. So when we talk about stress on the brain, like, she knows about it, and we can break down how seeing these images on a regular basis are actually affecting our physical and mental health. So we want to talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So we're gonna.
So what we say? What does the trauma look like? What does stress look like when it comes to the brain?
Okay. So just basic chronic stress causes the brain to shrink.
Okay.
So you start to see areas in the brain shrinking from chronic stress. So when we say chronic stress, we mean stress for a long period of time.
Over and over. That you
over.
haven't alleviated.
Exactly. And what starts to happen is the brain itself starts to shrink in certain areas, and areas that we need.
So what what does that shutting down look like?
So the shutting down looks like basically you having certain issues with concentrating.
Okay.
You having issues with your memory. You having issues with planning. You can't really plan. You're having trouble planning. Whether it be planning a project or completing a project, you're struggling with it. You're struggling with concentrating. You can't focus on one thing. You need a lot of breaks.
Memory.
I was going to say you start to see deficits in your memory. You can't remember as much as you used to. And it starts off small, but those are the small things that you start to see when you have had chronic stress.
Okay. And then what about over the long haul?
And then over the long haul or long term is where you start to see the dementia and Alzheimer's. That's when you start to see the actual breakdown in the brain.
Right. And another thing that you didn't mention is also depression. So a lot of times PTSD and chronic trauma can co-occur with depression. So we experience both at the same time. So when our brain is constantly emitting cortisol and adrenaline, which are the stress hormones, when we feel stressed, that's what our body emits. Those hormones are made for us to be able to run fast, jump high, get away from danger from like an evolutionary standpoint. We're energized and we feel on edge and tense and all those things. Like when you have to give a presentation, like you're hyped up. But our bodies are not meant to be like that all the time.
All the time. That's the key.
Right. And so when we find ourselves feeling depleted or drained or sad, it's because our nervous system essentially has been shot. And that depletion can feel and translate into something like a depression.
Right.
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 So That's what trauma and stress is going to look like on the brain. So it's really necessary for us as Black people, being that we experience it more, for us to take this mental side seriously. Meryl says, I was wondering if it led to dementia. Yep, dementia, Alzheimer's, it can lead to both. So if that's something you have a history of in your family, or that you might be more at risk for, you especially want to take care of your mental stress and or mental health, and make sure that you're managing your stress levels.
I'll tell you the other question.
Okay. How do you regain that strength in the brain after the shrinking has occurred? I'm going to say that would be a question for you.
It's hard to regain the strength in the brain, Tavia. What you want to start to do is try to strengthen the brain by doing small things to strengthen your memory, doing more activities to use that part of the brain. So you can try to create the strength in that area where there is a deficit.
Okay.
So if you're starting to see your memory kind of off, start doing things to exercise that part of your brain.
A game of memory, like
a game of memory.
Card game.
I always tell my mother to do puzzles. She has a bunch of puzzles. Do the puzzles, word puzzles.
Sudoku.
Those type of things. Trivias. Do things to strengthen that part of the brain, and that will start to help. And you will see the difference if you're doing it repeatedly. You will see the difference and feel stronger in that area.
I'm wondering if learning new things also helps with that.
Trying new things,
learning like how to play an instrument or things like that.
So those will create different connections in the brain. So learning new things, trying new things, moving more, things that you probably wouldn't normally do, and you start to do, you will start to not only strengthen but create different connections within the brain.
So L'Oreal asks, did we say that stress can lead to dementia? We said chronic stress can be a contributing factor to dementia. So if you're already genetically at risk, like maybe you have family members who suffered from dementia, and then you're chronically under stress all the time, you're putting yourself more at risk for not catching, but for having having dementia.
Yeah, long term.
Right. All right. So now, before we jump into some solutions, we also want to talk about the generational aspect of stress and trauma.
Yeah.
Because our generations, our ancestors have experienced more stress, again, I want to say, than any other group of people, at least for Black Americans who are descendants of slaves. Stress is literally in our DNA. So I want to kind of give you some research or some background on what supports that. So a while back, I don't remember the name of the institution, but they did a study on lab rats, and it's called like the cherry blossom study. So what they did was they took these little rats, and we're always experimenting on rats. I feel bad for the rats, like these little poor little animals. Like,
we got to get it done somehow.
We got to get it done. I don't know. There's got to be another way. But they did a study on these rats, and so what they did was they put the rats in this cage. And it was a cage where they could emit an electric shock to the bottom of the cage. Okay. So whenever they released the shock, the mice would feel it in their feet, and it would go through their body.
Okay.
And what they did was, while they were shocking these mice, they would all simultaneously release the scent of cherry blossoms into the cage.
Okay.
So they conditioned the rats to associate the scent of cherry blossoms with the trauma of getting shocked. Okay, so, and if you all aren't following me, feel free to ask questions. So this is what they would do. And then after a while, they conditioned them, they stressed the little guys out, they had ulcers and all kinds of issues. And then they took these mice and they bred them. And what they found was that for their descendants, so their children, all the way down the line, these rats would be conditioned that even though they never experienced the stress of the electric shock, they would, if any time those mice smelled cherry blossoms, they would start to have a stress response.
Wow.
So it was programmed into their DNA. Now, here's how we know that happened, because then they would take a control group, a group of mice whose ancestors hadn't experienced that trauma, and they blew the scent of cherry blossoms into their cages, and they had no response.
Wow.
So these mice's children, all the way down the line, I think they went 8 generations down, still felt stressed out by the scent of the cherry blossoms.
Wow.
and because of that trauma, even though they never directly experienced the trauma. So what does that mean for us? That means we could still be feeling the implications and the genetic changes as a result of our grandparents that were experiencing slavery on plantations.
Right.
So to me, when I heard that, I was like, wow.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So
that explains a lot.
Right. Now, how do we bring that back to today, and what kind of implications does that mean for us? Well, one of our stress responses is humans, high blood pressure. So when you get stressed, your blood pressure goes up and then it comes back down. But if it's a chronic thing and then it's passed down generations after generations, why do you think Black people have such a hard time with blood pressure and managing their blood pressure?
Yep.
Because our genetics have been literally
programmed
to just, you need your blood pressure high because you need to be able to run and jump and get away.
And do everything else. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So it's crazy. Now Meryl says rats' brains are the closest to humans. I didn't know that. Yeah. And then Tavia says that study was done by Emory University. I can't remember, but when I heard that, I was like, it makes so much sense as to why we have so many of the challenges that we have, from losing weight. You had mentioned how,
the stress, the cortisol, again, back to the chronic stress. It produces cortisol in the body, but it produces too much. And so when you have too much cortisol, that's what makes it harder to lose weight. And that goes back again to just the prolonged stress that we have. And not only does it affect the losing weight, but I think, like you were saying, it affects everything else.
It even affects like their psychological adaptations as well. So something like not trusting authority or not trusting people in power, that belief can literally be passed down generations.
And rightfully so.
Well, yeah, all of it makes sense.
All of it makes perfect sense.
So I had to touch on that generational piece, because that's acknowledging, and we say we empower ourselves to make changes, but we always acknowledge the trauma and things that have happened to set black people back. And so from this mental and physical health standpoint, we're starting behind. We're at a deficit.
Yeah.
So we have to be all the more serious about managing these things for ourselves.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So getting into the solutions. We always want to talk about solutions.
So just a few practical tips, right? One of my favorite, I think it works for me, and I think a lot of us need to do it more often, is logging off social media. So social media, I feel like when we're on it too much, our brains, always goes back to the brain. Our brains are overstimulated, right? So you're stimulated all the time from going on, reading and doing this, that, and the third. But I think that we need to give our brains a break.
Right.
We need to give our brains a moment to not be stimulated, to not do anything. It's very important just overall. I think it's just, you feel the difference. Let's put it like that. You feel the difference when you're on, you feel it when you're on social media, you're reading this, you're reading that.
Even if it's not stressful, it's just work.
It's just work, exactly. You're stimulated. So I think that one of the biggest tips for me is just to log off. For a weekend, like you say, you've done it for the weekend.
I just did it this past weekend.
Just for the weekend, a couple days, even a day. Just not go on, and you feel the difference mentally. Right.
Yeah. And I want to ask you all, what are some of the things that you all are doing to manage your mental health? Drop it in the comments. Let's help each other. Let's share resources and talk about what works for you. So logging off is great. And I want to just add to what you just said in terms of why your brain needs a break. So there's something called decision fatigue. So when we are looking, scrolling and processing information, that's using the prefrontal cortex. I'm putting to the front of my forehead. That's where the part of your brain is that is involved in decision making and thinking and processing, concentrating and things like that, right? So that part of the brain needs a break. Otherwise, you're going to experience this decision fatigue. So that's why you see people like executives, CEOs, presidents, they have a lot of people who do the basic day-to-day stuff for them, like lay out what they're going to wear, because that's one less decision they have to make. And because they need that brain power in order to be able to make these high level important decisions. We need the same thing. We need breaks.
Absolutely. And I think also too, just to piggyback off of that point that you just made, I think that's one of the reasons why we're always, or why you may feel, I'll speak for myself, you're tired. And you're like, why am I so tired? I slept. I've slept pretty much. I'm eating okay. I'm eating good. Why am I still tired? That's why you're tired. It's the mental piece of it. It's not the physical piece. The physical piece is separate. When you're tired, you're tired. But I think when you don't give your brain a break, that's when you feel drained.
Right.
That's where you feel like I'm not getting enough. Something's off. That's that piece, the mental piece.
Right. Exactly. Oh, thanks, Winnie. Winnie said she loves the dress. So this is a good moment for us to shout out Black businesses. So this dress here is by Grassfield, Black-owned business.
Okay.
And Marv is wearing a Black-owned business as well.
Yep. Black 10.
Black 10, is that black10.com or something?
I think it's black10.com.
Now, they're not sponsoring us yet. So,
Yeah,
but we're still, but we're still shouting out the black businesses.
Yes.
All right.
So we have Mara has.
She said, Marv, what about mindless activities? So, Meryl, can you clarify what you mean by that, mindless activities, and what about it? He says, my wife and I have deep conversations. Tavia says, even from the visual aspect with the occipital, activity.
Come on, Tavia.
Occipital lobe, right.
Vision, that's all vision. Absolutely, that's true, Octavia.
Yeah, that's a lot to process. Visually.
Visually, yeah.
Yeah. All right, Jahaz says building closer relationships with God helps to bring more and more balance to our mind, body, and spirit. In our lives, prayer makes a major difference for the better. Absolutely. Mark, maybe you know something about this, but from some of the research I've heard, information I've heard, Black people are pineal, are that gland is larger for Black people, and it tends to be more connected to spirituality and spiritual activities. Have you?
I don't know about that too much, but I know that's deep rooted.
We need Jesus, like
that's from the beginning of time, though.
Yeah, we go jumping into Jesus. We need something.
Yeah, but I think that goes back to like slavery. Like church is deep rooted in our culture, but I do agree with Jihad.
Yeah.
For me, it has to be a higher power. We need something.
We need something.
We need something. So whatever that looks different for everybody, whatever that is for you. I know for me, prayer, it works.
Right. We absolutely need that.
Right.
Jason says, good place to talk about the cleaning company. Maybe that's a way of managing stress. Delegating, really. What? Go ahead, get plugged. So Marv has a cleaning company, or one of her side hustles she just launched.
No, it's not a side hustle. That's a whole business.
Excuse me.
She gotta get it right, y'all. That's a whole business, not a side hustle. But it is the These So Fresh So Clean .com. Check it out if you need any cleaning services. We are here for you. Thanks, Jason.
Yes. All right. Meryl says maybe something that comes easy to you. If you're a musician playing music, if you're a chef cooking, sometimes. The comments, I can't even read it. Where'd it go? Something that brings you joy, but that's not challenging.
Absolutely, Mary. Yep. And I think that even with COVID, hopefully we have all found something that brings us some type of joy.
Yeah.
And we had a chance to kind of explore, because when you're working, you may not have time. But hopefully during COVID, everyone has found something that you enjoy, or a new hobby, or something that you just love. Yes, it helps.
What Meryl said about music and cooking, that actually reminds me that when I was giving out some tips when COVID first hit, when you're going through stress, one of the things you want to do is things that get you back to our like primary functions, meaning things that we did when we were more like hunter gatherers before we became so developed and industrialized and all that. Things that we had to do as humans to make us feel alive. So things like cooking, things like gardening, things like building, those things that get you back into your body and just get you connected with the world around you.
And nature.
Some of those primary functions, nature. So playing music, things like that. Those are things that we want to get into. All right, Rashonda, just tuning in, Katie, but you're killing the dress and the headband. Thank you. All right, we have Kiever, focusing on separating my awareness from the event that is trying to take hold of my attention and influencing my emotions. So that's deep, Kiever. I think what you're referring to, the way I define it with my clients is mindfulness. So being aware and thinking about what you're thinking about. not being so caught up in the event and the thing that's happening, and how, and really recognizing how you're processing it, so that you can decide what direction you want to go in. So for example, with COVID, your automatic thought, where your brain, your reptilian brain, your unconscious brain might say, okay, we're gonna die, that's like the automatic thought. But when I think about that and I'm mindful and I assess that thought, I say, is this thought helpful, and is this thought true? It's definitely not helpful, and I can't necessarily say it's true. So do I want to disconnect from that? So being aware of where your thoughts are going is so crucial. All right, let's see here. We got your shout outs for your business. Okay.
Yeah.
So Marv, you gave the logging off. So I want to give a few tips that I use as a therapist. And
you tell your clients.
Right. These are things I tell my clients
Okay.
regularly, all the time. When they first come in, these are the basic level things that you can do without any real effort. It's simple things.
Okay.
All right. So the first one, and this is going back to how do you deal with panic attacks and things like that.
Okay.
One of the most powerful, I'll start with this one, is cold showers and the use of cold water, cold shock. That's what I call it. So if you're experiencing panic or high anxiety, or even if not, this is good to do just to calm yourself, calm your body, calm your nervous system on a regular basis. My brother he got to a point where he was doing it every day for 10 minutes of taking a cold shower.
Wow.
All cold water.
Okay.
So there's a few reasons why you want to do this. When you enter into a cold shower, it's going to automatically cause you to breathe in deeply.
Okay.
And I'll talk about deep breathing next, but that deep breathing is part of the solution. You want to be able to breathe deeply and to extinguish your stress hormones. So that's key.
Okay.
Also, you can't be in your mind and thinking about all the problems and stress and things like that. Anxiety and stress take place in your mind. So you can't be in your mind and also feeling that cold water at the same time. Your mind and your attention is automatically going to go to the cold. So that's going to ground you, bring you back to your senses, bring you back to reality, like your literal senses. It's going to bring you back to that. So that's a way of getting out of your head and back into the physical world around you. And even though the cold water isn't comfortable, it's not threatening.
And is it also a little bit of like a distraction from everything that you have going on?
Mm-hmm.
It may be a bit of a way to just it's cold and you're thinking more about that than everything else that you have going on.
That's why I say it's grounding. It brings you back to just your senses, so it shifts your attention to something that is more manageable emotionally.
Okay.
Also, the cold water, it sends a signal to your body, and maybe to your brain. Maybe you could talk about this. It sends a signal to your brain that, okay, his body is cooling down. That must mean everything is okay. Because when you're anxious, when you're stressed, your body temperature heats up.
Absolutely.
And so this is when the skin feels the cold water, it kind of sends the opposite signal to the brain that says, okay, she's cooling down. She must be all right.
Yep.
So it's all connected. We are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah.
So those cold showers that works. I would say 98% of my clients that have panic attacks, they can stop it by just jumping in the shower. Now, if you can't get in the shower, then something like splashing cold water on your face, holding ice cubes, putting a cold compress around your neck, or like what I said I did when COVID hit and I had I felt the panic coming. I just went outside. It was cold at the time. You can go outside without a jacket on and just let the cold hit you.
Okay.
And then that'll help bring your nervous system down.
Okay.
So that's one that you want to do.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Our next one. So as I mentioned, when you do the cold showers, it causes you to immediately breathe in deeply. Deep breathing is another key stress management tool. So a lot of people know that when they're anxious, they're stressed, they should just take a deep breath. But most people don't know how to do it properly. So it's not just a matter of take one big deep breath and you'll feel fine and count to 10. That's not how you do it. So
you're going to show us?
Well, I'll explain it and I'll give you a little demonstration. So you want to make sure that your exhales are twice as long as your inhales. So maybe you inhale for the count of 3. And then you exhale for the count of 6.
Okay.
So that 6 count of exhaling is really slowing everything down. It's much slower than what we normally function. And that slowing your breathing down is going to slow down your heart rate. Your heart rate and your breathing are connected. When your heart is beating really quickly, you're going to notice that you're breathing really quickly. So you can slow down your heart rate by slowing down your breathing. Now, and then once you slow down your heart rate, that's going to slow down your all the racing thoughts and the nervous system and the brain activity and everything. Okay. So you start by slowing down your breathing. So a count of 3 and 6, or you can do 2 and 4, but always make your exhales longer than your inhales. And then here's another key. You want to make sure that your oxygen is going down into your belly. So as opposed to your chest. A lot of us are chest breathers. If you ever look at a baby breathing, they're like, their stomach is just going up and down. They're laying flat back and their stomach is going up and down. But for a lot of adults, for whatever reason, we've learned to breathe into our chest. So it's our chest going up and down. So what I have my clients do, I have them put one hand on their chest and one hand on their stomach, and then start to practice the breathing. And it should be the hand that's on your stomach that's going up and down. Not the hand on your chest. So you can practice that. We'll do it for 2 beats. I'll give you a count. So you should breathe in 1, 2, 3. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale 1, 2, 3. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now that might be too long for some people. You look like you were struggling with that one. It could be 2 and 4.
I'm stressed, y'all.
She's stressed. You can do 2 and 4, but make that exhale nice and long, and do that for about 2 minutes, and you'll definitely feel more relaxed and more calm.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So I want to ask everyone out there, what has stopped, if you're not already in therapy, what has stopped everyone from going to therapy? What are some reasons you can say that you haven't been if you haven't gone? I know for me, I always put it off.
So does that mean...
I know I need some therapy. Lord knows. Lord knows I need some therapy, but I always feel like, oh, I'll get to it at some point. Oh, I don't need it right now. But I know it's something, and especially with COVID and 2020, and then just things that come up in my life, I'm like, okay, yeah, I need to really sit down, find somebody, and make this happen. Stop putting it off.
And you don't have no excuse, because I could just tell her somebody to go to.
That is true.
I mean,
but you know, like you always feel like you have time to get to some of the stuff in your life, and I think what 2020 has taught me is no, let's get to it now. Let's not put it off any longer.
Well, what I'm hearing is like therapy session. What I'm hearing is that you haven't made it a priority. That's what I'm hearing.
No, full transparency. I have not made it a priority. I don't. I feel like it's a priority when stuff comes
when it's an emergency, which is how a lot of people use therapy that way.
Right.
They don't consider it until they're in crisis.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
So, and I've heard, instead of waiting for the crisis, be proactive. And
no, I'm looking at the comments. Go ahead. Instead of the crisis. But for me,
proactive.
Yeah, when I started therapy the first time, that time when I had that panic attack when I was 27, I had thought about it before. Right. But I bet you that panic attack got me in there. Crisis mode. That's what brought me in. But had I already been in therapy, I can tell you, that wouldn't have happened. Okay. Most of my clients that start out therapy with panic attacks, once they're in, they're good because they have the skills. You guys really could avoid panic attacks just with the information that we just gave. But having someone to regularly unpack with you is going to prevent you it's going to prevent that accumulation.
That's the key.
Right. The key. So make it a priority. Marv says it wasn't a priority. Drew says time. Time was the reason why he hasn't made it a priority, or the reason why he hasn't started going to therapy. Drew, yeah. But to me, that goes back to priority. We got to prioritize our time.
That's true.
Right?
That is true.
All right. Octavia says other people's schedule. Darn kids. Yep. But I want to see you all prioritize your health and your mental and physical health. Yeah. Because if you're not around the kids, if you're not good, they're not going to be good.
Especially as their mom.
Yeah. Mom has to have her self-care.
That's true.
Meryl says the copay. It's always money. All right. So Meryl, I want to address that. So Marv asked the question, what stops you all from participating in therapy? I want to give some resources for you all, because therapy, that would be my next stress management tool. Regularly unpacking, processing, learning tools, learning skills, getting a different perspective. Therapist is not just about sitting on the couch and someone psychoanalyzing you or telling you what to do. They're giving you the tools and skills to be able to manage your stress, process long-term trauma, understand yourself better. All of that helps to take away some of the weight that our daily experiences are adding to us.
Makes sense.
So a few resources. Meryl mentioned the copay stops her. So there's one resource called Open Path Psychotherapy Collective. I think it's, if you Google Open Path Psychotherapy Collective, that's a directory of therapists that all accept sliding scale.
Okay.
So a lot of therapists, myself included, are out of network or just extremely expensive. I'm not extremely expensive, but $200-300 sometimes a pop. So if you're going every week, that's not a lot of people can afford that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So finding a therapist, if finances are an issue, or you don't have mental health benefits with your insurance, or you don't have insurance, finding a therapist that offers a sliding scale, and unless you pay out of pocket at a rate that you can afford, is going to be really helpful. So Open Path Psychotherapy Collective is one resource.
Okay.
Another reason people don't go to therapy is because they need to find a therapist that looks like them.
Absolutely.
So you want to go to therapyforblackgirls.com. I'm listed there. A lot of my colleagues are listed there.
Okay.
And you will find Black therapists, all Black therapists in all 50 states.
That's
50,
amazing.
50.
Yeah. That's how much right.
And the District of Columbia.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. That's true. That's great. That resource is wonderful, so people can get help that they need, and find people that look like us.
Right. I think therapy has to be culturally competent and culturally informed. If it doesn't, you don't have to work with a Black therapist, but they have to understand your culture and understand, because that's who you are. And so having a therapist that understands you, if you're looking for a therapist of color, that's going to be a site for you. There's also, I should have written it down. This was an afterthought. But there's a therapist directly specific for Latinos too.
Okay.
So just Google that. The directory will pop up.
Okay.
I need to put it in the comments or show notes. I'll put it in the comments and show notes.
So people can take it.
Because we do have Black Latinos.
Yes, we have some comments.
That would be me. Y'all, I'm half Puerto Rican, for those of you all who don't know. All right, let's see here.
True.
Wondering how effective virtual counseling is versus in person. That's a good question. And I did want to say this about virtual therapy. Now it may be easier to find a therapist on Therapy for Black Girls, because a lot of therapists are now offering virtual therapy. Now the thing is, you have to find someone who's licensed in your state. But now that a lot of therapists, myself included, that are offering virtual therapy, you can be working with someone who's maybe 3 hours away from you, still in New Jersey, but you wouldn't have been able to go to them before because they were just too far. So that kind of opens up the options. Now, in terms of how effective, I'm doing all virtual now, and I think that it's just as effective as in person. However, there are little things that can sometimes be missed. And also, if you have a certain specific issue, virtual might not be the case. So for kids, virtual might not be as effective. If you have a brain, some type of brain disorder, so maybe it's some kind of neuropsychological issue or something like that you're going to therapy for, that might not be the best thing. If you have serious really bad PTSD, you may need to be in person, because there are certain forms of therapy that require them touching your body, like tapping on you and different things like that. So it depends on you and what's going on with you, but you can always talk about that with the person that you're considering therapy with. But if you're kind of basic level, day-to-day issues, day-to-day anxiety and stress, I think that it works just as fine.
Okay.
All right. Meryl says, I went to couples therapy with my ex and I actually loved it. I plan on going back very soon once I make it a priority. Love that, Meryl.
Absolutely.
All right.
And people are asking for that website.
Okay. So we have therapyforblackgirls.com, and we have Open Path Psychotherapy Collective. Google it, and then the website should. I'm not sure if that's the website or not, but that's the name of the organization.
Perfect.
All right. Jihad says all excellent topics. Thanks, Jihad. The second one for Black people. Therapy for Black girls. Yep, Tavia put the notes in the comments. Thanks, Tavia. I'm going to make it a priority to start therapy. This conversation is inspiring. Aw, that's why we do what we do.
Exactly. It's a good place to start.
Okay. So now we want to drop down a little bit we're kind of wrapping up. We want to drop down to talk about activism. And I'm just going to kind of get on my soapbox to talk about something that I see that comes up a lot in my sessions with my Black clients, and I have mostly Black clients. So now that we're in the midst of this revolution, I'm seeing a lot of clients that are feeling guilty about not being involved in protests, even though there's a whole pandemic going on, or not knowing what to say or do, and they're feeling guilty about it. And I think that we need to really work on eliminating our guilt around feeling like we have to do something. We have to be fighting. Yes, racism is a real issue that we want to stand against, but racism is really not a Black problem. Mm-hmm. It's the white problem. Like, that's their problem. That's their thing that they need to be
taken care of, or getting to the bottom of it, whatever the case might be.
Right. And we stress ourselves out going back and forth trying to explain to a person who just doesn't want to see why this is wrong and Black Lives Matter. We stress ourselves out. Yep. But there are, thankfully now we're seeing allies that are taking up the mantle and saying, you know what, I'm going to talk to my family because you shouldn't have to do this. Mm-hmm. So racism is not a Black problem. But it is our responsibility to heal and to take care of ourselves. And so my thing is, if you need to rest, if you need to disconnect, if you don't know what to say right now, don't blame yourself or guilt yourself. Give yourself the space to rest. Give yourself the space to figure out what you're going to say. It's enough of us already fighting. And we're constantly fighting. We've been fighting for generations.
So you're saying it's okay to do nothing?
It's okay.
If that's what you need.
If that's what you need, and it's okay to do nothing for a while. Give yourself that permission to, and I don't want to say do nothing, but to rest, to take a step back, to do what you need to do to take care of yourself. That takes me to the Audre Lorde quote that self-care is an act of resistance. Did I mess up the quote? It's something like that. Self-care is an act of political warfare, an act of resistance. Those who are racist, they don't really want us to be well. They could care less about whether we live or die. So us taking care of ourselves, us taking time to rest, us not always being in fight mode, that in and of itself says, I am worthy. I am worth it. I'm worth taking care of. Mm-hmm. That's not the message that they want us to get to understand.
Absolutely.
So you have to come first.
And I also feel like if you're dealing with people that are racist, we're not going to change their minds. How they feel is how they feel.
Right.
They're entitled to feel
until something happens, but you can't, through conversation.
You just can't do it. And
right.
I had to check myself in the beginning, going back and forth with folks on Facebook, deleting folks. I told you about that, deleting folks, going back and forth and then deleting folks. But then it's like, it is exhausting. So I agree with that. It's exhausting, it's draining, and you're not going to change folks' minds. So
right.
The bottom line is take care of you.
Right.
Take care of us. That's it.
Right. Meryl says there's different ways to be involved also. Community activism is also effective. Go to local community meetings instead of large protests. Yeah, and that's another thing, what I had been saying to my clients is you don't have to make a Facebook post or show up at protests in order to be involved. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a different role. Some people may watch the kids of the people that's out there protesting, or feed the there's so many different ways,
or send money to some of these organizations.
Send the money
on the front lines.
Right. There's so many different ways to be involved,
right.
And so pressuring ourselves to make some statement on social media, to a bunch of people who likely think the same way you do anyway. Or to be in protesting in the streets or whatever. It's not. It doesn't all have to look the same way. You know, the body needs more than just the head.
But also too, if you feel the need to go on social media and say what you need to say, that's fine too.
No, yeah, it's fine.
Whatever.
But I'm saying it's not necessary.
It's not necessary. But if you feel, you know, I see a lot of people that feel the need to post these things or information or stats or whatever the case might be. If you feel that's what you need for you,
right,
that's fine as well.
Yeah,
whatever that looks like for you.
What I'm saying is essentially, I'm not saying don't get involved. What I'm saying is self-compassion first.
Absolutely.
Take care of yourself first and be kind to yourself. This is not, you didn't cause this problem, and you can play your role in fixing it, but don't guilt yourself if you need to break, if you don't feel like fighting for the day, or if you don't know exactly what to do at the moment. Absolutely. Or what to do or what to say at the moment. Yeah. Give yourself that grace, because the implications of fighting all the time and being out there all the time, it's not good either. Right. That's another reason why our health is the way it is, because we've been fighting for generations.
Tired. We're just tired.
Yeah.
Drained.
Right. All right. Meryl says educating our youth, volunteer by having study groups with reading materials, and love one another.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good note to wrap things up.
Yeah.
Love one another.
Thank you for that.
Yes. Thank you, Meryl. So that was our show on Our Mental Health Matters. Good conversation in the comments today.
Yes.
Thank you all for listening. Now, for the Building Black community, for you all that are out there, we're going to keep this video up in our Facebook group for 24 hours. So catch it. Otherwise, it'll be gone in 24 hours, and then you'll be able to listen on the podcast. And we're on Spotify, we're on Anchor, we're on a few different platforms now. Make sure that you share this podcast as well. One other comment: I had to stop protesting in 2016. It was triggering for me for me being met with riot gear. I do other things now. Yep, and that's a perfect example of shifting to take care of yourself.
Knowing what was best for you.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. All right. So thank you all so much for joining us. We will see you next week.
Thank you.